Before the ink on the Weimar Constitution could dry, a monumental event overshadowed its promise and the future of the German Republic it aimed to stabilize. This event was the drafting of the Treaty of Versailles. As the dust settled from the World War and the National Assembly began its deliberations in Weimar, the German populace showed scant regard for the weight of their defeat. Under the urging of the Allies, Germany had ousted the Hohenzollern monarchy, quelled Bolshevik uprisings, and embarked on establishing a democratic republic. This sense of a new beginning fostered a naive optimism among the Germans who believed they were entitled to a fair peace based on President Wilson's 14 points, rather than the harsh reality of their military defeat. This misplaced confidence ignored the harsh precedent set just 1 year prior when the German Supreme Command imposed the Treaty of Versailles on a defeated Russia, an agreement which stripped Russia of vast territories and imposed severe reparations. Yet, as German minds did not wander back to those dark days, they remained ill-prepared for the severity of the Versailles Treaty. This treaty not only demanded disarmament and territorial concessions, but also insisted on Germany accepting blame for the war, further inflaming a wounded national pride and setting the stage for future upheaval. The consequences of the Treaty of Versailles would cast a long shadow over Germany, challenging the fledgling Weimar Republic's stability and sowing seeds of discontent that would later find expression in extreme political movements. This was the inauspicious beginning of a period marked by internal strife and the looming threat of another major conflict. As this introduction unfolds, the narrative will delve deeper into the intricate details of the treaty and its profound impact on Germany and the world stage. As Germany reeled from the aftermath of World War I, the drafting of the Weimar Constitution marked a crucial yet tumultuous phase in establishing a new republican order. This process unfolded under the shadow of the impending Treaty of Versailles, which cast a long and ominous shadow over the nascent republic. The German populace, still grappling with the immediate effects of the war and revolutionary upheavals, seemed at times oblivious to the gravity of their national defeat. Inspired by the Allies' promptings to dismantle the old monarchic and militaristic structures, Germans were somewhat naively optimistic about receiving a just peace grounded not in their defeat, but in President Wilson's idealistic 14 points. The drafting process itself was fraught with challenges. The Constitution aimed to introduce a democratic framework through a system of proportional representation, which, although intended to prevent the wastage of votes, inadvertently facilitated the proliferation of numerous small, splinter parties. This fragmentation made it difficult to achieve a stable majority in the Reichstag, leading to frequent governmental changes and political instability. In 1930, for example, the electoral list included some 28 different parties, reflecting the fragmented political landscape that plagued the Weimar Republic throughout its existence. Key figures such as Professor Hugo Preuss, the principal architect of the Constitution, advocated for a more centralized state structure that would dissolve individual state powers in favor of provincial governance. However, these proposals were ultimately rejected by the National Assembly, a decision that would have significant long-term implications for the Republic's stability. Additionally, the inclusion of Article 48, which granted the president emergency dictatorial powers, was a controversial feature that would later be exploited by successive chancellors to bypass the Reichstag entirely, undermining the democratic foundations of the government. The Constitution's vulnerabilities became starkly apparent when the terms of the Versailles Treaty were publicized, provoking a national outcry. The German public, led by political figures like Chancellor Scheidmann and President Ebert, reacted with indignation and despair, setting the stage for further political and social upheaval. As Germany faced these compounding crises, the flaws in the Weimar Constitution's design contributed to the systemic weaknesses that would eventually facilitate the rise of extremist politics and culminate in the demise of the Weimar Republic. In the wake of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles emerged as a profound and contentious document, impacting Germany and shaping the post-war geopolitical landscape. Published on May 7, 1919, without prior negotiation with the German delegates, its terms were perceived as a humiliating blow to the nation, already bruised by war and internal upheaval. This treaty was not merely a peace agreement, but a punitive measure that sought to drastically curtail Germany's capacity to wage war again. Key provisions of the treaty included the restoration of Alsace-Lorraine to France and the ceding of territories to Belgium and Denmark, which were particularly aggravating to the German populace due to the historical and emotional significance of these regions. Moreover, the treaty demanded the return of territories taken during the partitions of Poland, which included areas only after plebiscites, further incensing the German sentiment, which saw these stipulations as an affront to their sovereignty and national pride. The treaty also imposed severe military restrictions on Germany. It limited the German army to 100,000 volunteers, banned the possession of tanks and aircraft, and significantly reduced the Navy's capabilities. These terms intended to disable Germany's military strength comprehensively, preventing any future aggression. Furthermore, Germany was required to accept full responsibility for initiating the war and to extradite Kaiser Wilhelm II, along with other officials deemed war criminals. Financial reparations were another crushing aspect of the treaty, with Germany obligated to make substantial payments in gold marks and provide various resources as compensation. These reparations were set to place a stranglehold on the already weakened German economy, inflaming widespread resentment and economic distress among its citizens. Public and political reactions in Germany were of shock and vehement opposition. The terms were publicly denounced as unrealizable and unbearable by figures like Ebert, the provisional president, and led to widespread protests across the nation. The political leadership, backed by the overwhelming majority of the German populace, was cornered into a dire situation where rejecting the treaty could lead to renewed hostilities, for which Germany was unprepared. Ultimately, the inflexibility of the Allied demands and the internal consensus against the treaty culminated in a reluctant acceptance. The German delegation, under extreme pressure and facing an ultimatum, signed the treaty in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles on June 28, 1919, marking a significant yet ignominious milestone in German history. The Treaty of Versailles would later be critiqued for its role in laying the foundational grievances that fueled the rise of extremist ideologies, leading directly to the onset of World War II. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles had immediate and profound political consequences for Germany, igniting a wave of national outrage and setting the stage for future upheaval. The German public, along with its leaders, were caught off guard by the stringent terms laid out by the Allies. The treaty was not seen merely as a set of peace terms, but as a symbol of severe humiliation imposed on a defeated nation. The political fallout began almost instantly. High-profile political figures such as Philipp Scheidmann, the Chancellor, and Friedrich Ebert, the provisional president, publicly condemned the treaty. Scheidmann's dramatic declaration, "May the hand wither that signs this treaty," echoed the sentiment of betrayal felt across Germany. This emotional response was mirrored by Ebert and the government, who labeled the terms unrealizable and unbearable, underscoring the collective shock and indignation that permeated the Weimar Assembly and the German populace at large. The treaty's demands, which included significant territorial losses, military restrictions, and economic reparations, combined with the obligation to accept blame for initiating the war, were particularly inflammatory. These terms were perceived not only as an affront to the nation's honor, but also as a direct threat to Germany's future stability and security. The stipulation for Germany to hand over Kaiser Wilhelm II and other so-called war criminals further incensed the public, which saw these demands as a personal affront to their national leaders and a vilification of their country. In response, angry mass meetings and protests erupted throughout Germany. These gatherings were not only a display of national unity against the perceived injustices of the Versailles Treaty, but also a platform for the burgeoning extremist movements that capitalized on the widespread discontent. The far-right and far-left political factions used the public's dissatisfaction as a breeding ground for their ideologies, positioning themselves as defenders of German dignity against foreign oppression. The broader implications of the treaty were also significant for the Weimar Republic's stability. The political landscape became increasingly polarized, with the Republic's moderate forces struggling to maintain control amid rising extremist threats. This polarization made it challenging to form stable government coalitions, leading to frequent changes in leadership and policy direction. Behind the scenes, military leaders like Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg and General Wilhelm Groener were involved in critical discussions about the feasibility of resisting the treaty terms militarily. Their eventual reluctant endorsement of the treaty, based on the realistic assessment of Germany's inability to resume hostilities, marked a pivotal moment. This decision underscored the military's significant, yet often behind the scenes, influence on political decision-making, hinting at the profound and lasting impact the Treaty of Versailles would have on Germany's political and social fabric. As the treaty was signed, a sense of defeat enveloped the nation, setting the stage for the tumultuous years that followed. The widespread public reaction and the political elite's responses to the Treaty of Versailles sowed seeds of unrest that would later contribute to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, drastically altering the course of German and world history. The decision to sign the Treaty of Versailles was fraught with internal conflict and political drama within Germany. As the deadline imposed by the Allies approached, the German leadership grappled with the potentially disastrous consequences of both acceptance and rejection of the treaty. This period was marked by intense deliberations among Germany's top political and military leaders, reflecting the deep divisions and the high stakes involved. Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg and General Wilhelm Groener played pivotal roles in the decision-making process. Initially, there was some consideration of military resistance against the terms of the treaty. Hindenburg, influenced by Groener, who was more cognizant of the futility of further conflict, assessed that while it might be possible to temporarily reclaim territories in the east, in the West Germany stood little chance against the might of the Allied forces. This military council was crucial. It highlighted the grim reality that renewed hostilities would likely lead to greater national catastrophe. President Friedrich Ebert and the Weimar government were under immense pressure to make a decision as the ultimatum's deadline loomed. The government faced an internal quandary. Accepting the treaty meant subjecting the nation to severe restrictions and humiliations, while rejecting it risked renewed warfare that Germany was ill-prepared to sustain. The political atmosphere was charged with urgency and the heavy burden of an impending decision that could shape the fate of the nation. As the final hours ticked down, the atmosphere among the German leadership was tense. Hindenburg, unable to bring himself to directly influence the civilian government's decision, left the final call to Groener, who in turn communicated the military's stance to Ebert. This passing of responsibility reflected the complexity and gravity of the situation, as well as the historical weight carried by the military's judgment. Ultimately, the decision to sign was swayed by the realization that Germany had no feasible military options, and that refusal could lead to worse terms and increased suffering for the German people. The National Assembly, backed by the reluctant agreement of the military and the urgent counsel of the government, voted in favor of signing the treaty. This decision was communicated to the Allies just minutes before the ultimatum expired, highlighting the desperate circumstances under which the agreement was reached. On June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, a setting fraught with symbolism and historical irony. Given the site's association with the proclamation of the German Empire in 1871, this act marked the end of World War I, but set the stage for the manifold economic hardships, political upheavals, and social unrest that would plague Germany in the years leading up to World War II. The shadows cast by this decision were long and dark, influencing the trajectory of German history far beyond the immediate aftermath of its signing. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles on June 28, 1919, marked the end of World War I, but set the stage for a series of events that would eventually lead to even greater global upheaval. The venue itself, where the German Empire had been proclaimed in 1871, added a poignant irony to the proceedings, underscoring the dramatic reversal of fortunes for Germany. In the immediate aftermath, the treaty had profound and far-reaching effects on Germany and the international order. Domestically, the treaty's harsh terms exacerbated the economic woes and political instability of the Weimar Republic. The limitations imposed on Germany's military capabilities, coupled with the burdensome reparations, fueled hyperinflation, unemployment, and social discontent. These economic difficulties provided fertile ground for political extremism, contributing significantly to the rise of the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler. The national psyche of Germany was deeply scarred by the war guilt clause, which assigned blame for the war solely to Germany. This clause not only humiliated the nation, but also served as a rallying cry for those who sought to revise the verdict of Versailles through aggressive foreign policy in the years that followed. The sense of injustice and desire for revenge became central themes in Nazi propaganda, which exploited these sentiments effectively during the political chaos of the 1920s and early 1930s. Internationally, the Treaty of Versailles had several unintended consequences. By failing to ensure a stable and cooperative post-war European order, it contributed to the geopolitical tensions that led to World War II. The punitive nature of the treaty and the economic hardships it imposed on Germany are often cited as contributing factors to the global rise of militarism and nationalism in the interwar period. The treaty also left unresolved issues in Eastern Europe and elsewhere, which became flashpoints in later conflicts. The new national boundaries drawn by the victors often ignored ethnic and historical realities, leading to minority issues and border disputes throughout the 20th century. In conclusion, while the Treaty of Versailles brought temporary peace, its legacy was one of bitterness and resentment. It failed to create a sustainable and peaceful order in Europe and instead set the stage for another, more devastating conflict. The lessons of Versailles about the dangers of punitive peace terms and the importance of fair and equitable conflict resolution remain relevant in international diplomacy today.